It's peaceful, lying on the pavement, like Raggedy Andy feeling nothing except a dollop of fear and a gulp of wonder. I should sit or stand or give a wave. I should wince in pain. People amble up, mouthing foul assurance that I'm going to be okay. I'm a spectacle. I see and hear and speak. No one is saying much. Is this an out-of-body experience or a no-body experience? Could this be paralysis?
This podcast is dedicated to Lan Remme, his wife Laura, and their family. It was a pleasure and a privilege to have Lan as part of the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System. Lan played a variety of roles within the spinal cord injury community. With his wife Laura, they were an integral part of our Consumer Advisory Board. Lan was also a key member of our research team and a peer mentor on our recent SCI Thrive study. We have all felt a profound loss with his death in June of 2021. Some time ago, we were fortunate to have Lan join us on the SCI Forum podcast to talk about his writing and share some of his poems. After his spinal cord injury and then retirement, Lan became a poet. We had the opportunity to talk to Lan about his journey from auditing courses through creating and publishing in poetry journals. Lan was such a wonderful people person and impacted so many, which he was also able to do and will continue to do with his poetry. Hearing about both the process of writing and listening and reading his finished products were beneficial to Lan in living his best life after spinal cord injury. He provides an important lesson to all of us about finding something that brings you joy and how expressing yourself can have benefits to you and to others. Thanks, Lan. We miss you.
Welcome to the SCI Forum podcast. This podcast was produced by the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System in the University of Washington Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. The Northwest Regional SCI system is dedicated to improving the lives of people with SCI through excellent patient care, research, and education. To learn more about our podcasts and videos or to make a donation, go to sci.washington.edu.
Hello and welcome to the Spinal Cord Injury Forum podcast. My name is Jeannie Hoffman. I'm the director of the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System and a clinical psychologist and professor in the University of Washington Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. Today I'm talking to Lan Remme. Lan has become a writer after retirement. Thanks so much for joining us today, Lan.
Thanks for having me and inviting me to talk about something that's really fun to talk about. It's something I've come upon and enjoy doing, so having an opportunity to talk about it as well is equally enjoyable.
Wonderful. Let's start just by telling me a little bit about yourself, when you were injured, how you were injured, kind of what your injury level is.
Sure. It's been right around 9 years now, and I had a bicycle accident, and I went over the handlebars and had to have a C5, C6 cervical injury that's resulted in a paralysis, quadriplegia or tetraplegia, and impaired pretty much a lot of my my normal functions that I used to have.
From what I recall, you initially worked on getting back to work and kind of tried to do that for a bit and then decided it was probably time to retire.
Yes, for me it was a late in life thing, and I was within a few years of retirement as it was, and it did set me back a bit as far as going back to my normal work, but I wasn't really ready psychologically or economically to retire just then. So I worked pretty hard to get back on my job and work for a couple more years to finish up the things I still needed to do. And then I retired it's been about 5 years now since I did retire.
Excellent. So tell me about where writing came in. Has that been something that's been part of your life always, or is that something that came to you, since retirement?
Sure. I think it's something that's always been part of what I enjoy doing and what I've had more of an aptitude to do since I was young. It came fairly naturally to me. And in college, my major was English, and I took also creative writing classes. As part of that, I took a class in novel writing, short story writing, and a couple of essay writing classes. And my emphasis then was on what we call prose, the opposite of poetry. I guess prose is whatever isn't poetry or vice versa. But then, I got out of college and I went to work, and I could see that I was probably not going to make any money writing prose, but I did have government jobs that required a lot of report writing. And so the ability to write a clean report for the courts and things like that, it did sustain me and help me in my career throughout all those years. And so when I did retire, I put that aside, but I'd sit down at the computer and with my voice-activated dictation, which I'd picked up post-injury, I would do journaling and that kind of thing. Lots of people with SCI do blogging, and someone said, oh, yeah, I got to do a blog, because every day of your new life is going to interest somebody because it's unique and lots of people are curious about it. And so I did try the journaling, and I couldn't get too excited about that. But one of the things that I did do after retirement was started taking classes back at the university as a retiree and as an auditor, which was a resource available to me. And I did tend to take English classes. And one of them, actually just a year ago, was a writing class. And in that class, I became interested in writing again, and in specifically writing poetry. And I had a couple of pretty good teachers who gave some basics on writing poems, and also one that was new to me that I hadn't heard of. It was a professor named Sean Wong, came and told us about a class he was doing at Madigan Hospital in narrative medicine. And he was going down to Madigan and working with vets who had injuries and all kinds of even traumatic brain injuries, and giving them writing classes and how that was a therapeutic process, and some of them regained function through the act of creating and putting things on paper. And so that was interesting to me as well. So in that class, I, as an auditor, were not really supposed to submit things, but I snuck through a poem after having the basics. The teacher said a poem is a series of images that are sensual, visual, tactile, sound, smelling, and that's what a poem is about. So my first poem in that class was the focus was to have a verse for every sense. And so that was the first poem I wrote.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about, you went from kind of really studying the creative writing aspect And then in your work life, you kept writing, but it was really in this kind of more professional capacity. And then you kind of tried out the like blog posting, which is kind of a weird mix, right? It's semi-creative, but not really. It's kind of like, a diary, your day-to-day experience sometimes. And then really, it sounds like you didn't get back to the creative writing until you started taking the classes again.
That's true. The classes did inspire that. One of the things they asked us to do that I hadn't really done before either was to memorize a poem. And I started doing that, and I've now memorized a few. And just having that going around in my head somehow generated the desire to duplicate that or replicate it in some way.
So can you explain what the goal is for memorizing a poem?
The goal for me caused me to really slow down. I would have to go through it repeatedly, to recite lines several times, and then once it was memorized, to continue doing that. And so I took a much deeper look. I came to understand the poems in a much deeper way. I came to appreciate the subtleties of syntax and rhyme and alliteration that were contained in them.
That's great. I mean, it almost sounds like a meditative experience for you. And you mentioned that meditation's been an important thing in your kind of self-care. Did it work both ways for you?
Absolutely. You tapped into one of my secrets, that these poems have become part of my existence, and I can go to them for a certain mood, for a certain poem at any time of day or night, and actually sometimes night if I'm, having a bout of insomnia. There's nothing better than losing myself in a beloved poem.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you hadn't done poetry before this. Had you read a lot of poetry?
Yes, as part of being an English major, certainly that reading poetry was a part of it. I think, though, my emphasis had been more on reading the great novels of literature up to that point, and since then reading more novels, some for enjoyment, but trying to stay on top of the ones that were winning, like Pulitzers, and see what the good writers were doing these days as well, but not too much in the poetry realm.
I know, Lan, you mentioned that one of your poems got published. Can you tell me where that fit into your experience or your classes that you were taking?
Sure. The first poem that got published is titled The Paralytic, and my class on writing, the teacher would mention student journals that were looking for submissions, and other journals, not just student journals, but she mentioned one called The Capillaries, and it was a narrative medicine journal, and they were asking for submissions based on experiences of care and healing. And I thought, this is my chance. This is my chance to actually publish a poem for the first time. And I sat down, it was during that snowstorm, and this was related to my accident and internal experience at the time. And of all the poems I've written, it was the easiest one. It was waiting to be written. And it just went on the page, very little revision, which is not typical. And they accepted it with very little corrections to it. And so it's officially my first published poem.
Excellent. Could you read that one for us now?
Surely. This one is titled the paralytic. It's peaceful lying on the pavement like Raggedy Andy feeling nothing except a dollop of fear and a gulp of wonder. I should sit or stand or give a wave. I should wince in pain. People amble up, mouthing foul assurance that I'm going to be okay. I'm a spectacle. I see and hear and speak. No one is saying much. Is this an out-of-body experience or a no-body experience? Could this be paralysis? Unthinkable. Step on the gas, says a nurse in the gathering crowd. No step, no gasp. The nurse whispers, don't move him. Unthinkable. Sirens knell. Do they knell for me? Rough-looking, the medic inquires, even though he already knows the answer. Didn't you feel that? I don't know what he means. Pushed into the square red car, I am soon en route, spinning. The driver knows the way. Vertigo. Tornado. I'm sucked into the vortex. Time travels from linear to spatial. I enter an unknown universe. Amnesiac hours of tests lead to surgery. I wasn't there. Did I die? I wake in an opiate cloud spiced in medicinal fumes. Many, many visitors file past the bed. Cheerleaders, high-fivers, prayers, all light-hearted. Drunkenly, I thank them for coming. Not much is familiar in this new body. I dine on chocolate and sure, seasoned with frustration. The woman on the other side of the curtain cries at night. I couldn't fall asleep anyway. I'm all about can't. The therapists are all about can. I'm trying to appreciate that I'm alive. Diagnosis, C5-6, quadriplegia, I'll live. Alive perhaps, but unmoving still. A blob of protoplasm with DNA intact, I feel like a thing. Does a thing find love? Does it have value? Where does such a being find a place in this world? I wait for a miracle while I hold steady with reality. Will you be able to walk again? I don't know, but I would like to have a job and inclusion and a few more bodily functions. Exoskeletons on parade, stem cells with snake oil cures, billions in grants, decades of research. Hope remains, but not the Jesus kind, not the stand up and walk kind. The miracle does arrive in a human touch, a warm caress, a child's smile, a stranger's understanding, a professional's guidance. Even from the darkest night, love rises anew.
That's fantastic, Lan.
Oh, thank you.
I would love for you to read a couple different ones.
All right, this one is called Winter Journeys, and it's kind of a Christmas poem. It's a poem that, after it kind of came together, someone suggested that they would like to send it out with their Christmas cards. And so I said, sure. And so we actually did that as well. So it starts, the excitement of a Douglas fir draped atop a wind-starved van, held by a strand of twine, stirs wintergreen memories of December journeys. Metronomic blades beat back stubborn rain. We drive north on the two-lane road. Red barns shelter dappled livestock from the cold, damp day. Slowing through Savannah, just an eye-blink snapshot of a gas and grocery place next to the Viking Hall. A clash of honking bursts from the muddy field. It's the chatter of snow geese who forage for granules, a soggy feast at the end of an Arctic flight. Undampened by the icy rain, they choose a sodden land in retreat from their Siberian home. It is the worst time of year to travel. Hope and renewal hinge on the outcome. 20 centuries of journeys have passed since a young woman and a graybeard, trusting an angel's words, returned to the city of David. No more than a drive-through in a windstar, a junket for a winter bird. That faded desert march stretched to a week, a forecast of cold, wind gusts and rain. Heeding the edict from Rome, they shiver in the wild, warmed only by the words of treasure in her heart. I decorate this tree in silver and gold, in ceremony of that ancient pilgrimage. I'm filled with hope for the next arrival, whether it comes as a birth or a death. I will prepare and bow to the promise of that coming long ago.
Tell me a little bit more about the process for writing this poem that you just read.
There were a few poems and poets that I particularly admired that I'd been reading, and this was inspired by a famous poem and a famous poet, a poem called The Journey of the Magi. The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. A couple of the lines in there actually echo that, but most of it is my experience. My wife Laura and I go to Arlington every year, and we get a Christmas tree, and then we drive north to Stanwood, and we buy a few kind of seasonal pastries and that kind of thing in that Norwegian community. So it's a tradition for us, a December journey, and one we've been doing for years, and it echoed that. But there's also in that journey, there's a field of these snow geese that come down from Siberia. And I read there's like in Skagit County, 10,000 of these geese that come every year. Siberia, that's a long ways away. And it must be pretty bad to want to come to a place like that in the winter, because I tried to make it sound like that wasn't such a great place to hang out. But I've always marveled at migration of different, especially birds.
Yeah.
But geese in particular, they fly for like thousands of miles.
Yeah.
And, remarkable. It's a miracle. So I was comparing that to the biblical story, and also, and in the case of the journey of the Magi, that's about some people riding camels through some pretty harsh conditions too. But here we are in modern times in a van.
Yeah, a Windstar van. I
A
love it.
Windstar van.
Yeah.
So, but still a traditional
Yeah.
journey of its own sort, and
Yeah.
one that I put into a poem, and some people kind of connected with it.
Yeah.
This one is called the coyote or coyote, and it refers to more of the urban coyote rather than the wild type, because I live in the city, just near a park, and we do have urban coyotes, and I saw one wandering through our neighborhood just last year, and they're commonly seen, and so a lot of people consider them a nuisance, Whereas I thought it was kind of pretty cool. I enjoyed seeing it there and thought it was a nice addition to the area. So this is my response to the kind of people that complain about him in a way. All right, starts out. Dressed in ecru, he came into the neighborhood and crossed the busy street. He sidestepped the shiny chrome menace that reflected his image and did not betray his wildness. Parades of trucks slapped billows of ooze onto the forest floor and grit the air. The patchwork quilt of gray plows through stands of sword ferns and salal and scatters the fragrances of fir and cedar. The city stretched to him, and he merged with the perimeters. The percussions of pistons and arias of sirens did not oppose him. The flashing of lights were not his enemy. But now he senses the tall, pale creatures that walk on hind legs, and he steadies his gaze. Dead coats of crimson and lime fluoresce from a distance. Stealth and speed do not intimidate. Aromas that hint of wildflowers and pine warn of their approach. But an ambivalence of fight and flight swarms about them. Like bees startled from a hive, he regards their confusion with wariness.
That's great. So tell me about kind of what makes that your favorite or current favorite.
It just feels like my best effort that I felt like I moved up a level since I first started doing it. It said something that I had some feeling about, some value, and I sent it around to the neighbors, and I got a pretty good response from the neighbors, and so I liked writing it. I liked the urban wildlife, and it just felt like a good thing to write about.
Yeah, it's so visual. It's amazing. How do you share your work? You mentioned that you kind of shared with friends, shared with neighbors. You've had how many things published now?
Well, 3 actually published.
Mm-hmm. So the publishing ends up in different places, but how else? You've certainly written more than those.
Yes, I have people that I send them to on email, and people that I think would appreciate them. I've identified several people now, and I don't send every poem to every person because I know not everyone likes the same things. For instance, the paralytic is one that I send to just a few people, and then the winter journeys to just a few people. So not everyone has the same reaction.
Mm-hmm. So how do you decide when to submit something for publication? Is it that there's a call for something in a magazine that kind of meets what they're looking for, or how have you decided?
Well, I did that like 2 weeks ago. Part of it, a goal that I set was to submit 3 poems in the next week for publication. I'm just trying to work up the courage. I felt like these last 2 poems and possibly another thing that I wrote that wasn't exactly a poem were ready for publication. So I went ahead and did that as part of a goal, and I just needed to work up the courage to do it.
That's great. There was a 4th poem we were talking about having you read.
So this was submitted to the narrative medicine journal, student journal called Capillaries, and it's called Phantom Pain. And everybody asks me, I have to be careful whenever I write a poem. They go, oh, do you have phantom pain? Well, actually, no, I don't. But I got the idea for this poem by reading about a research project that was published. They print them on the walls at the hospital and the medical center. And they had done some experiments with Botox injections for people with phantom pain who were like amputees. And they said it had been effective. And so to me, the whole concept of phantom pain is pretty fascinating from a poet's point of view, because it's pain from something that doesn't exist. And so you see the possibilities are endless. Okay, so I'll go ahead and read that. Homeostasis, the doctor says, shifts the gears in a pivotal world. When wind chills frost the skin or heat waves bake it brown, the body bungees to set point, a new normal. Hey doc, what's this about phantom pain? So he recommended a tonsillectomy. You don't need tonsils, he said, just an old wives' tale. Appendix served no purpose. Who remembers them? A finger, a toe, we have too many. A kidney, a lung, they gave us an extra, but you need only one. Hey doc, the phantom pain, please explain. The heart? Get a transplant. The brain we can retrain. How about the soul? Whoa. The soul, I don't know. Doctor, what about the phantom pain? According to the Mayo Clinic, phantom pain, once considered psychological, is now classified as real sensation that emits from an absent body part. The doctor said, or so the story is told, there was a man who lost his soul in a card game with the devil. Relieved he was to see it go, believing more in the power of will. Never a cry more forlorn was heard than when the black hole sucked it in. We heard the phantoms gloat, a mournful sob, and then a choke. The doctor tugged his ear and said, some ills have no cure. I'm afraid this man said his doom. Blackness of the heart is the worst, but darker still is an empty soul. Psychiatry or acupuncture may help, or not at all. He'll wish he hadn't let that soul go. The phantom brings great angst, this we know, but we cannot mend an absent whole. Science knows nothing of nothing, though some claim Botox, a miracle drug, can turn a nothing into a something. In a famous fit, King Lear has said, nothing will come of nothing. In this there is some hope. Whether through wizardry or wordplay, we must find a way to keep this demon at bay. Then I talk about botulinum toxin. It prevents the release of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine from axon endings at the neuromuscular junction and causes flaccid paralysis. Has been effective in alleviating phantom pain.
I love it. That's wonderful.
It's meant to be kind of funny. I wrote it in a humorous vein. I had fun with it.
Oh, that's great. And I would imagine they were eager to have it. The poem.
They were. In fact, the editors, wonderful young students who are, these days, they all have double majors, but they're both English majors and pre-med. And so it's not enough to just be one thing anymore. But yeah, brilliant young people, and they were very happy to get it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, do you have a goal to publish your own book? Do you have a goal of a certain number of poems? You said certain number of poems to submit, but have you had a thought about it, or are you just writing when you want to write?
I write every day. It's important to have a discipline. They say that routine is more important than inspiration, of course, and I've certainly learned that. And I have a goal. Yes, I'd be thrilled to have a book, 30 poems, have somebody publish it. They say self-publishing is the last resort, so that would be a dream to get a book published, but also to have some published in some professional journals.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. So what advice would you give others? It seems to me that this kind of came back to you through having this open space of retirement and looking into learning more, keeping your brain going and active and finding a discipline again. But what advice would you give to other people? How might they find writing if they have an interest?
Sure, writing or any form of artistic work or creation, painting, all kinds of music, all kinds of things. I think the lesson I've learned, the reason I probably gave it up when I was young was because I felt like I probably wasn't good enough to justify spending the time at it, that I had to be good enough to be really successful. But if I could change something about that, I would have just kept doing it in some way, just for the sheer enjoyment of being involved in being creative, because I think it's very fulfilling and meaningful. So I would encourage anybody who has that desire to just do something every day at whatever level they experience, and do it for the pleasure of doing it.
So you have great discipline about your writing. Do you have a certain amount of time that you spend each day on it? And kind of, other than the sense of accomplishment of spending the time, what else does it give you to have that everyday kind of time set aside?
Well, it's important to have the discipline, and I've for years studied the practices of different writers. For instance, Hemingway always said he wrote 100 words every day before doing anything else. And he said, if I ever miss that, I've got to do 200 words the next day. Stephen King writes 5 or 6 hours a day. He says any writer who writes less than 3,000 or 4,000 words a day isn't really writing. So if you look at all the books he's published, and all pretty successful ones. So everyone's got to find their own pace. But for me, right now it's from 1 to 3 hours a day, usually in the morning. That's when I have the most control over my time. And the life of a quadriplegic is not always in total control. But in the morning, I have a good hour or two to myself when I can work on it. And then later in the day, I find another hour to revise and things.
That's great.
My wife is complaining about all these medical poems. She says, no more medical poems. You've got to write about love and beauty. And more often, she definitely has been asking for more. I also wanted to say that my poem, The Paralytic, was a one-time thing. I think everyone who's had a spinal cord injury has a poem or a story to tell. And that was kind of my version of that. But that's a unique experience, and it's one that is of interest to others. So I would encourage people who have something like that to tell it.
That's a great suggestion. Find the way to tell your story and share your story. It's a great kind of way to end, too. Thank you so much, Lan. I appreciate you coming today and for sharing your poetry with us.
Thank you for having me. Very enjoyable afternoon.
While we were in the process of recording the podcast, Lan and I spent some time chatting about our mutual love of huckleberries, which I love to eat and my husband loves to pick in the mountains near his family's lake cabin. A few months after our meeting, Lan sent me a note thanking me for the experience and shared the poem which I wanted to add, given his wife Laura's request for more love poems. This is titled Huckleberries. As I lay late in slumber, I borrow one last dream and pull your pillow closer to breathe your breath again. The cabin by a mountain lake, this crisp September dawn, sits not far from berry bushes that you are drawing near. The bowl of doughy batter, now dormant in the fridge, thinks the juicy pleasures of a huckleberry's tart. A touch of flame, butter dripping, and sweet nectar from Vermont. I dream of your deft fingers as they pluck the berries ripe, tender, oh so tender, with a touch that's ever light. Bring those berries soon, my love. I lie awake for you, longing for the gentle warmth that you bring home to me.
Thank you for listening to the SCI Forum podcast. To learn more or to make a donation, please visit sci.washington.edu.